New American Liberty League. Listen, I'm here today with my good friend, Mr. Rick Kiper. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
You know, before Facebook, I felt really alone in my mindset, thought process on a lot of things. And at church, I feel like that too sometimes, just because it's so the people are so passive sometimes. Mr. Kiper wrote an essay and read it a couple weeks ago at our church, and I believe that more people, more churches have to hear this message. So I wanted to bring him on today to go over that. We had been talking about this for a while, and with what happened last week with Trump, he used to work for the FBI, and I thought that would be a perfect fit, someone perfect to ask about it. So that's why he's with us today. So Mr. Kiper, you wrote that essay, and it's, man, when I heard it, it hit me because that's a theme that we talk about on the show too and on the page. Can you either read the whole thing for it, or however you want to do it? You can read the whole thing, give us points, however you want. I just think it's something people need to hear.
Sure. Well, I appreciate it, and again, thanks for having me on. I think, and I'm no prophet, obviously, but it does feel like some of the themes in this particular essay that I've been working on for months, really, we're really seeing a lot of this and manifested most recently in the attempted assassination of President Trump. You know what? I could just read it, and then we can go back and talk about certain sections if you like. It'll take about 8 minutes. Is that all right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You want to do it?
So, and I did, just so, for your audience, I took out a lot of the very overt political stuff because, I was warned by my family members who don't really appreciate me talking about politics at church. But I've added them back in for today, so if you don't mind, I'll So this essay is called "Only One Side," and I have a disclaimer at the beginning. None of the opinions I'm about to express necessarily represent the views of this church, that is Tallahassee First Church of the Nazarene, or the Florida Nazarene District, or the Global Church of the Nazarene. So, with that out of the way, I'll start. We've all heard that God doesn't take sides in politics. It's certainly true that God's Word makes no mention of modern political parties, such as the Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, Socialists, Communists, and so forth. However, there's a distinct line being drawn in today's society. If you're a Christian, you can feel it. This line is not along political party affiliations, but along the border between right and wrong, good and evil. Sadly, the church doesn't often discuss what is good and evil anymore because we're afraid to take a side on any topic. We throw up our hands and we say, well, both sides are bad, or both sides are equal, they're the same. Because that allows us to feel virtuous, so we can go back to watching Netflix and playing video games and so forth. But I'm here to tell you that both sides are not the same. Only one side ridicules your faith in a creator while insisting the human mind evolved from pond scum. Only one side believes the American flag is a symbol of oppression. Only one side will burn down your home or your business and call it peaceful protesting. Only one side demands you worship global warming ideology and you must fear disastrous rising sea levels while they go and purchase beachfront real estate. Only one side will show a photo ID to buy cigarettes, but will shriek racism if you ask them for an ID to vote. Only one side will censor what you say in the name of free speech and tolerance. Only one side removes their opponents from election ballots in order to save democracy. Only one side prosecutes, imprisons, and now attempts to assassinate their political opponents. Only one side forces our military to learn critical race theory instead of how to fight threats to our country. Only one side is destroying women's sports by allowing men to compete as women. Only one side believes a man can have a baby and a woman cannot be defined, even by a Supreme Court justice. Only one side supports drag queen story hour for kindergartners while outlawing the Bible in schools. Only one side criminalizes parents who discipline their children, but celebrate parents who physically mutilate their children through gender reassignment surgery. Only one side forcibly takes what you have worked for and gives it to illegal aliens. Only one side uses public tax money to protect the borders of other countries while intentionally opening our own border to criminal invaders. Only one side wants to take guns away from law-abiding citizens to reduce gun violence committed by non-law-abiding citizens, or criminals. Only one side wants to require people who were never slave owners to pay reparations to people who were never slaves. Only one side has desecrated the most important Christian holiday, Easter, or Resurrection Day, by designating it as Transgender Awareness Day by presidential proclamation. It just happened this past Easter. Only one side will claim, my body, my choice, but will force you to take an experimental injection. And finally, only one side murders unborn babies and calls it health care. Obviously, I could go on, but by now you may be asking yourselves, well, how did we get here? How did so much evil come to rule our lives? Well, how do you think? We've ignored evil. We pretended it didn't exist. Then we tolerated evil, because who wants to be labeled as intolerant? Then we voted for it. That's how we got here. It pains me to say this, but the majority of people who call themselves Christians avoid discussing the topic of good and evil. They act like distracted and immature children in their walk with Christ. In fact, the writer of Hebrew tells us in chapter 5, verses 13 and 14, that anyone who lives on milk, being still an infant, is not acquainted with the teaching about righteousness. But solid food is for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil. Not being able to discern between good and evil is a sign of spiritual immaturity at best, or godlessness at worst. In Isaiah 5:20, the Word of God warns us, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Does that seem like what's happening today? That is certainly what was happening in the early 1930s, as the Nazis were slowly and methodically transforming the morals of the German people. Hitler's government, with its allies and the German media, poisoned the German population with propaganda that literally called evil good and good evil. And we all know what happened after that. But what did the Christian do, or the Christian church do at that time? That's right, nothing. Why? Because they felt it wasn't appropriate for the church to take sides or to be involved in politics. Is that what you want to happen here in the United States? Will you stand by while our corrupt media, government, and large corporations transform the moral fabric of our country, censoring and persecuting everyone who dare oppose them? If you're okay with that, then go back to watching Netflix. You're not going to be useful in this fight. But if you're serious about preserving a culture where we're free to share our Christian values and fulfill God's mission on earth, then I would respectfully suggest you get involved. How? First, by sharing the truth about good and evil with your family, with your friends, and on social media platforms like this. Second, by supporting alternative, Christian-based news, entertainment, and family-friendly businesses. Third, by praying hard and voting like the future of our religious freedom is at stake. Finally, I'll conclude with a quote attributed to Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was one of the very few Christian voices in Nazi Germany. He said this: "Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act." My brothers and sisters, how will we act? Which side are we going to choose?
Thank you, sir. Now, that's the fourth time I've heard that, and it's still powerful. But the first time I heard it, especially because it was in a church, gave me the absolute chills. Because it seems that's where we need to hear it the most. Thank you for that. So now we talk about, there is definitely a good and an evil. And I'll never say that God loves one side more than the other. We are all children of God, and we pray even for our enemies. But I will say this: even though God may not love one side more than the other, one side loves God more than the other. Let me ask you this. You talked at the end about how to beat this culture, how to beat these people. And you said you have a list. A lot of it starts with our wallets.
Yeah.
And you said you have a list of alternative companies. And on our show, we always try to support local conservative business owners and businesses. Would you mind sharing a little bit of your list?
Sure. You could do multiple segments on just the alternatives to the different things that we consume from big tech and big corporations. And certainly family-friendly local businesses is where to start. There's an app called Public Square, and to be part of this consortium of businesses on Public Square that you can search, you have to agree to certain things. And for example, we're a God-based organization. We will never require anyone to take an experimental injection. We'll never require masks. Those sort of things. Kind of conservative values. You can search for those businesses on Public Square. It's absolutely free. And I've done that, and I would encourage, if you know businesses that are like-minded, encourage them to be part of that as well. Obviously, they make money by selling ads and things like that. To put certain businesses, up in your visibility. But the fact is, these are businesses that we want to put our dollars towards because we know they want us, and they share our values. We don't want to give our money to corporations that hate us. Okay, so that's first and foremost. Now there are other really, really easy news services. I don't get any of my news from the mainstream media, not even Fox News. I see clips that are sent to me from certain people, but I don't make a habit to watch any of it. My news mostly comes from the Epoch Times, which I found to be the most down-the-line, fair, and resourced, because their articles, every single one of their articles and videos that they produce, by the way, they always have links to the original source. So if they're referencing a study on masks, the effectiveness of wearing masks, for example, they will have a link to the PDF that's in the published paper, so you can read it yourself and know that it's not being taken out of context. If it's referencing a video, they'll have a link to the video. So I value that a lot, and so instead of having a subscription to, say a New York Times or a Washington Post or something like that, I'll give it to the Epoch Times because they really value real reporting. I'll go to free websites like the Gateway Pundit just to see, but the Gateway Pundit skews right, okay, which may sound good, but we don't want to completely depend on those who are, advocating for one side or the other, but it gives me an idea of maybe topics that are important. So I'll go to the Gateway Pundit, but if I want to know the real hard news about it, I'll go to the Epoch Times, which I subscribe to. For entertainment, there are options also. One of my absolute favorite is Angel Studios, the Angel Studios app. So instead of, giving my money to Netflix, which promotes, things that I don't agree with, or Disney or something like that, I will put my money to Angel Studios, be a guild member, a subscriber there. There you can actually vote on movies and upcoming children's shows and things like that. They have some fantastic series. The Tuttle Twins. There's a series on young David, from the Bible. They're the ones that eventually produced and released Sound of Freedom, which was a runaway hit. So they have there have been a lot of companies before Angel Studios that have attempted to do this kind of crowdsourcing stuff, but Angel Studios has got it down now, and they even have a thing where you can, if you can afford it, and you can buy like tickets and pay it forward, so that people who can't afford to go to these family-friendly movies can do it. And just for example, in Sound of Freedom, they were hoping for 2 million tickets to be sold. The movie cost $14 million, and they have a little thing where how much towards their goal. They were at like 2,000% of their goal. They sold like 15 instead of 2 million. They sold like 15 million tickets. Worldwide, I think it was 250 million for a $14 million movie. They just blew everybody away. So Angel Studios, is an alternative to some of these other, Amazon Prime. And I understand, people subscribe to these other things, and people in my own family subscribe to them because they do have a broader set of content, for sure, absolutely. But my mind is this: we only have so much life. And if you have a choice between a subscription to a service who has, say, 10,000 videos and things you can watch, and a one that has 100,000, how many videos can you watch? So it's just a matter of investing our time and our wallet to companies that agree with us. And again, those are just two quick examples. We could go to browsers instead of using Google that tracks everything. You can use like Brave or DuckDuckGo, things like that. So, but that could be for another segment. But there are lots and lots and lots of alternatives to these big corporations, big tech, and big entertainment, big Hollywood that frankly don't agree with our values.
Absolutely. So whether it's local businesses or whether it's corporations trying to get big, we have to support each other. You have to, with your money, support conservative money, godly money. Okay, so this is a little deeper of a question. Now we're talking about how to beat them with our wallet, and I'm not saying we're at this point, but it may come one day. Hopefully not. We'll pray not. But if the time ever comes, and when the time has came for past generations, how do we as Christians within ourselves, or our Jews too, for that matter, Judeo-Christians, how do we within ourselves reconcile physically beating our enemy and remaining good, forgiving Christians?
Yeah, and I'm glad we talked about this a little bit earlier. The example I always like to use is David. David as the shepherd boy, who obviously a godly man. He was a young man at that time, but he was guarding his sheep, and God allowed him to kill a bear and a lion. And if you've ever messed with those animals, they're very, very ferocious. There are bears can take the head off of a cow with one swipe of the paw. I mean, these are just ferocious animals. And with God's help, David killed these animals. And David knew this, okay? So when he was going out, he was sent by his father, Jesse, to go out to take food to his brothers. He was on the front line in Israel's war with the Philistines. He found that, nothing much was happening except there was a giant out there named Goliath who was taunting the armies of Israel. And everybody was afraid of this guy. And I always ask the question, well, let's see, did David go and he saw the situation? Did he tell King Saul, well, have you prayed about it? Well, let's get together, hold hands, and pray about it. Or have a seminar on how to let go and let God, That's the Christian reaction today. Very passive, very, we want to be nicer than Jesus, and we think it's godly just to be hands off and not do anything. Where in the case of David, he said, you know what? That giant is like he said, this giant, this uncircumcised Philistine who is taunting the armies of the living God, I will go out and kill him. Because God has already delivered me from the bear and from the lion. And this giant is going to be like one of these animals. And he convinced Saul to allow him to go out there, and of course he killed him. So David was relying on his preparation, his guided and ordained preparation for that moment, and he recognized that he was prepared for that moment, and he acted. He didn't just sit back and say, okay, let's just pray about it. So I believe that today we need to be prepared. We need to take advantage, like Paul tells the church in Ephesus, take advantage of every opportunity, for the days are evil. We need to take advantages of opportunities to train ourselves, whether that's physical, firearms, just general health, and taking vitamins, so that we can oppose these ungodly mandates and these ungodly laws that they want to push down our throats. So I think preparation, expecting it, realizing it, that this is coming, being aware that this is coming, and being prepared for it is one of the best things we can do.
Absolutely. And you don't have to look too far back into history. 7 million Jews peacefully got on trains headed for death camps. And it took violence to win. And, we have to, as Christians, understand that there is a way to beat our enemies in a godly way. We could beat them by any means necessary. Like I said, this is not the time for that. If the time were to ever come, you have to pray for peace, prepare for victory, and know that you're strengthened by God, and know that you could still pray for your enemy, still pray for your enemy's soul. It is not good to hate your enemy. I'm not telling anybody to hate your enemy, but we have to be ready to defend ourselves, our families, and our freedom. So, the Trump assassination, Mr. Kiper, like I said, you used to work for the FBI, so I feel like this is in your wheelhouse. First of all, a couple things. Number one, when you first heard it, what was your first thoughts? And then as more information came out, and knowing what we know now about a week removed, what do you think of this failure? Was it a failure? So just your first impression, right away, what hit you, and what logically do you see now?
Yeah, well, my first impression was, almost disbelief. Obviously, when I saw the video and I saw, okay, this is real, then I thought, well, why now? Why now? All the rallies that he's done, and he's done a bunch of them, why now? And I thought, well, let's see. They tried impeachment, it didn't work. They tried to bankrupt him through all these other, sham indictments and civil trials. That didn't work. The other lawfare, the 4 criminal indictments, And most recently, the case down in Florida, where Judge Cannon threw out the case because she found, as Justice Clarence Thomas found, that the special prosecutor that was appointed by DOJ was appointed unlawfully, unconstitutionally. So the whole thing got thrown out. Probably the other case in Washington, D.C., that Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, he's working on that one. That one's probably also going to get thrown out. The Georgia case is on hold indefinitely. The Stormy Daniels case that he was just convicted on, the sentencing got postponed, and the judge said if it's even necessary by that time, once it goes through the appeals. So their lawfare is falling apart. Most recently, on the Monday before the Saturday that of the assassination attempt, that's when the Florida case fell apart. So I'm thinking, okay, the Secret Service has a 40-year track record of perfect protection of their protectees, and then within a week after all of this stuff is falling apart, and then of course after the debates and the debate performance and the polls and everything, it just strains credulity that the Secret Service is this incompetent. I can't believe it. I don't think any reasonable person can believe that this young man, this 20-year-old schmuck, was able to pull this off by himself. And when you look at the details of everything that was going on, the fact that the Secret Service, when they do their pre-operational scouting and preparation, their advance party, basically, is what it's called, they go through every single. I mean, it takes like a week. When I was in El Salvador, I also served as assistant legal attaché in El Salvador. And the Attorney General at the time was Alberto Gonzalez, sent his advance team. Now, the FBI actually provides protection for the Attorney General, as well as the Director of the FBI. So we have our own protection detail, but it's basically the same thing as the Secret Service. They go to wherever the event is going to happen, and they walk literally every step of their protectee. So if they walk out that door, they'll walk out that door, and they'll say, okay, how can somebody kill me at this spot? And they'll look around. Okay, high ground there, there's a roof, there's a water tower, there's a tree, okay? So where can I set up visibility and protection when my protectee is at the spot right now? And they do it for everything. When they go into an elevator, they will literally walk every step that is planned for that protectee. And so it just it's just amazing to me, and I just cannot believe the Secret Service would be this incompetent to not identify that rooftop as such a high priority potential vantage point that they would not put somebody actually on there, or looking at it continuously with a drone. Anything, just look at it continuously. Now, the Secret Service director, Cheatley, interesting last name, or Cheadle or Cheatley, she came out and said that they did realize that the rooftop was potentially an advantage for a shooter, but the slope, it's like a 1 to 15 slope. I mean, it's like terrible. Ridiculously shallow slope. But it was, she said there was, safety considerations for putting her people up there. There may be an HR violation or an OSHA violation or something. Wow. So she couldn't put people up there, but so they were stationed inside the building. I don't know how you can, watch. But later on, I don't know if you saw this, there was there are other buildings around there, or I think it's all part of one connected, collection of buildings. But there were windows that were within 40 feet of where the shooter was. And supposedly there were people at those windows looking out. Now, 40 feet, I mean, to me, I think of, like football. Florida State gets goes 14 yards and get a first down, right? 14 yards is a longer distance than what that window or those windows were away from the shooter. I mean, really, really close. So for them not to have constant eyeballs on that is just crazy to me. That I don't know why the media was making a big deal about this detonating device. We have no information of where explosives could possibly be. They're not reporting on it. They're not denying it either, that it could be in this car, it could be his house. But I mean, why would you have a detonator for, a remote detonator? Yeah. But if in fact there were explosives in his car, and he did intend to detonate those explosives, where did he get those skills? Because there's nothing in his background that they've been able to find that said that he had any kind of bomb-making skills. Mm-hmm. He did have a history of shooting. Mm-hmm. Apparently, he wasn't good enough, for his school's rifle team. But and then they're going through his phone, right? They finally got into his phone.
Right, which took suspiciously way too long. Yeah.
I was, aside from being a special agent in the FBI for 20 years, I was also a forensic examiner. I still do forensics examinations, and I've done maybe 200 or 300 phones. Okay, so I understand, what they're going through right now and attempting to get into this phone, but we have the equipment to get in. It shouldn't have been a big deal. They certainly should not have said he was he was acting alone before they even got into the phone.
Yeah, they should have just brought the phone to my wife. She would have gotten right away.
But the thing is, people don't understand actually that your phone. Not only does it, if you have location services on your phone, and most every phone does, and it's turned on, most every phone has it turned on because we just click that little button every time we install an app, and that just turns on everything, including our camera. Mm-hmm. But everything is being recorded. All your location is being recorded. You're searching in Google or whatever search engine. Those are being recorded, and then when you do the analysis on the phone, we call it a cell phone extraction. Extract the information from the cell phone, and then you can bring it into software like Cellbrite is like the gold standard that the FBI uses. That parses everything really nice into these really convenient categories of information, like Google searches, and so it's really quick to go down. I did the cell phone examination for, I don't know if you remember the MAGA bomber. Mm-hmm. Okay, the guy so he was a Trump supporter, but he sent a bunch of...
Which was also, that whole thing was very fishy also.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So, but the guy, once they identified the guy, and we caught up to him, arrested him, took his cell phones, took his devices. On his cell phone, I pulled up all the searches that he was doing. And obviously, he did searches on the ones, the public figures, the Hollywood stars and the politicians who had already received these bombs that didn't work, and none of them exploded, thank God. But he also had been searching for other people that had not yet received. And so I took that information and I immediately went to our Special Operations Center, and I said, look, here's a list of people and their addresses that he was looking for. And so we put out in FBI headquarters, something that's called a duty to warn, which is a notification to all those people to be on the lookout for a suspicious package because you were searched. Okay, but that is from the phone. Okay, so this guy, this shooter, this attempted assassin, he has all of that information. I mean, people don't realize how much information is being logged by your phone. And in the tools that the FBI uses, Cellbrite, and then a more advanced form is called Gray Key. It's just incredible how much information you can pull, where you are, what you're doing, the clicks, the searches, everything. So for us not to know a whole lot of information is very suspect, in my opinion.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Just with that was amazing, by the way. With that was great. With everything you just said, gut feeling, is this Secret Service, FBI doing a terrible job? Is this maybe some kind of inside job? And if it is an inside job, how many people would it realistically take to allow something like this to happen? Would it take a whole government conspiracy, or could this be done with just a few insiders?
Yeah, that's a great question. The way all large organizations work is that not everybody knows everything about what everybody else is doing. During 9/11, for example, I learned a lot of the news about what was going on from my family who had been watching the news, because I was out busy doing my job interviewing people, but I only had like this much of it. I only had this much of the case. So I was out interviewing people, and I was catching up on what everybody else was doing in my organization from the news through my family. So it's very believable that just a very few people who are working on certain aspects of this case can control the information. It's not like, oh, we found all these searches and now it's available to everybody in the organization. You have a forensic examiner who has that information, and by policy they can only do certain things with that information. And if their higher ups, if their chain of command decides, even his first chain of command, even his supervisor decides, you know what, we're going to hold on to that information, and under the guise of, well, we want to collect more information, but just kind of hoarding it and not sharing it, then that's perfectly feasible. The lack of security, or the security failures that happened that day, I'm always very careful to not attribute to malfeasance what could rightly be attributed to incompetence. And I'm also very sensitive to the fact that, you have limited resources. For example, in the FBI, I had a case where I needed a bunch of bodies to go out and do searches and arrests, okay? On one particular case, I had 10 physical searches, like at different locations, and 22 seizure warrants. So I had 22 seizure warrants, 10 search warrants. I needed a bunch of people, more than the FBI could provide. So what I did is I had squads in the FBI provide bodies to supervise each of these locations, and then we would get, Fort Lauderdale PD. Mm-hmm. I was working in the Miami office, so we had Fort Lauderdale PD. We had the U.S. Postal Service. We had Broward County Sheriff's Office. So we have other local agencies that would help us. We would do this, the supervising, and we would do the assigning of tasks, but you can't do it all. Right. So I'm very sensitive, and I really understand that they may not have been able to provide the Secret Service. They may not have been able to provide 50 Secret Service agents. From what I understand from different sources, like Dan Bongino, who used to be a Secret Service agent, I think they had like 3 full-time Secret Service agents, and then the rest of the federal officers were DHS federal officers, and I think there might have been maybe a dozen or so of them. And then they had local people that were assigned to do things. And what's interesting is that when it comes to that building where the shooter was, the Secret Service says, well, we assigned that building to the locals. And the locals were like, no, we were in charge of traffic and crowd control. But like you had mentioned at the very beginning, a half hour to 40 minutes before the shooting, the people, just the regular, public, saw this guy crawl up to the roof and started crawling across the roof, and they saw the rifle, and they're telling the local officers, hey, there's a guy up there, and it's just unbelievable that information did not get to the Secret Service and prevent the president from taking the podium. I mean, that's what should have happened. And now, more things are coming out, whistleblowers are coming out and saying things like, well, there was a call on a secure channel, a local secure channel between the locals and the feds, that yes, there was this threat, and they called it in, but nothing happened. So there's so many different individual things that went wrong. From the scoping out and then the setting up of the counter snipers. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the counter snipers were set up in 2 positions, And in both of those positions, there was an obstruction between them and where the shooter was. So he was out there with his rangefinder, and he was, rangefinder will measure the distance between you and the thing that you're looking at. He was looking at the snipers, he was looking at the podium, and, getting his distances. And then since he was there the week before, or maybe it was 2 weeks before, he was actually there on the premises. He could scope out, let's see, if I come up this way and if they set up a sniper there's like a tree obstruction, and it sounds like what happened was the snipers were set up in a position where the exact spot where he was, they couldn't really see him. This is according to some reports. But as soon as he shot and he went down, apparently he kind of moved his position a little bit to see if he could get a better shot at Trump. And that's when he poked his head out, that's when they shot him. Okay, that's according to some report. But it's hard to believe anything. I mean, who do you trust? What information? All the information that we get is based on somebody else's authority. And it's just, we all saw with our own eyes, the counter snipers are there, and then shots rang out, and then they took him down like just a few seconds later. And it's like, well, if you had him in your sights, why didn't you take him down before? It's just, there's so many things that has to come out about this. I'm looking forward to watching the congressional hearings and their explanation for all these things that went wrong. But like I said, just one of those things could have caused this, but there was a series of things that failed.
Right.
And for someone to believe that all of these failures occurred at this point in history, to this particular candidate after 40 years of a perfect record of protection, it's just incredible. I'm not buying it.
Yep, and it leaves us in a bad spot. It's either you're like me and you don't trust the government, or you start to see that your government is incapable of doing what it's supposed to do. And either way, it's in a bad spot. The other fishy thing is the fact that if he did all these, if he was able to scout this area from that vantage point, what gave him the confidence to know that vantage point itself wouldn't have someone on it, eyes on it? It's too, for me, it's too fishy. I thought it was too fishy from the moment I heard it, and the more I hear, and the more I hear from men like Mr. Kiper, the more I'm convinced. I don't trust this government, and it's like we talked about. It doesn't take a whole agency to be bad. I'm in no way saying that all the Secret Service is bad, all the FBI is bad. No way I'm saying that. But you heard how he just said there is ways that only a few people could really direct traffic, and that is a scary thing. Rick, thank you so much, man. That was very cool, absolutely amazing.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you for watching.